The changing face of the executive suite. Tonight, a conversation about Hispanic and Latino leadership in Hampton Roads. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. One of cable television's most popular offerings is a show called Mad Men. It's a drama about an ad agency set in the three-martini lunch world of the 1960s, when the nation was about to change dramatically. What didn't change as dramatically, though, is the culture of the C-suite, the top senior executives whose titles start with the word chief. Despite women and minorities in the workplace, the executive suite remains a predominantly Caucasian male arena. Hispanics represent only about 1% of the executives in the nation's largest corporations. But here in Hampton Roads, two men are changing the face of executive leadership at two major institutions, and one woman is working hard to launch an Hispanic Community Dialog. Joining us tonight, the new president of Regent University, Dr. Carlos Campo, the new president of Farm Fresh, Gaelo de la Fuente, and the founder of the Hispanic Community Dialog Organization, Beatriz Amberman. Thanks to all of you for being with us tonight. I appreciate it so much. Boy, it's so great to meet both of you as well. These are major institutions that you are now leading. And Mr. de la Fuente, where are you? Give us a sense of your background. You're from a place that you must be very happy to have left from a weather perspective.
That is correct. I recently moved from Minneapolis after living there for 2 years, but I am originally from Mexico. I was born in Mexico. My parents still live there, siblings live there, but I've lived in the U.S. now for 15.5 years.
And you followed in the footsteps of the legendary Ron Dennis at Farm Fresh, who did an amazing job of turning that company around. And this is a real area of concern, because I think you have described yourself as having been very lucky. And that's not necessarily the case for every Hispanic person who wants to come into the executive life.
Yes, I've, like I mentioned a second ago, I've been in the U.S. for 15.5 years, and in those 15 years, I've had the opportunity to work for 3 organizations, and went back to school, did do an MBA, but along the way I got positions of increased responsibility. I was fortunate to work for companies that were progressive, for mentors and leaders that invested time in me, and as a result of that, I now have this opportunity to be responsible for Farm Fresh. But as I've gone through this journey, I've recognized that I am somewhat isolated. I can't say that I have too many peers that have gone on the same path in the same time frame. And as I talk to those people that I interact with, and there are some things getting in the way, and I think it's my responsibility to look back, see what worked for me, and figure out ways to give back and make it better. You
know, that idea of social capital, the idea that if you're looking to get to that executive suite, maybe you see somebody there that you know, or somebody who knows your folks or your mentors or whatever. If you have 1% or less than 1% of Hispanics in the C-suite, as we call it, then that really reduces your social capital, doesn't it?
It is a significant challenge. We just don't have the leaders and mentors out there that can coach us and mentor us, that can pull us in, that can help us network better. So it is an absolute challenge for us to get ahead.
So what would you like to see happen to change some of that?
I think for me, it starts with doing the job that I'm supposed to be doing for Farm Fresh. So being the leader that Farm Fresh expects me to be, ensuring that we have a compelling offering for the customers.
I was there yesterday. The vegetables were looking good, so well done.
That's great to hear. So it starts with delivering on the expectations that the company has of me, the expectations that my associates have of me and the customers have of me. The second thing is to work on ensuring that my stores, my associates reflect the community where we operate at every single level. And where we don't, begin investing in those people that have the interest, have the talent, have the ability. Again, I've been there, and I was mentored, and I was given opportunities, so I need to do the same thing within my company to ensure that we are reflecting the communities at every level. The third thing is being in situations like the one I am in today, which is to look for opportunities to have greater impact beyond my company on how to give back and support other Hispanics that, again, have aspirations, have the ability, but for whatever reason haven't been able to find their way to break through the glass ceiling that might exist there.
These numbers are fascinating and certainly compelling. Dr. Campo, and nice to have you with us today. I know you've been here for a while, but in the presidency now at Regent University. I wonder what your sort of path has been, and how would you characterize the path that got you to where you are today?
Well, it was a fairly traditional path in higher ed, working up through a faculty member, then department chair, dean, VPAA, and then into this position. But it is rare, even in higher ed, to see that sort of pathway develop for a Latino. And I think that's, yes, it's true. I think higher ed has more of a programmatic approach, and I think that that is helpful. We see more and more leadership opportunities and leadership development opportunities for Latinos in higher ed, but we're not there yet either, if you look at how we're represented.
What's getting in the way? I mean, what do you, same question, sort of, what would you change in that
expand
scenario?
the show to about 5 hours. It just isn't a simple answer. But I think so much of it is about expectation. It is. We set expectations, I think, a little bit too low generally. I talk to a lot of Hispanic leaders, and they talk about our parents perhaps setting the bar too low. And again, that's a very big brush to get out because my parents held me to a very high standard. But I think in very many ways it's changing the expectation, starting at a generational level, and getting more leaders in places where this like-me leadership really can sort of take traction. I think that's an important piece as well.
It's very interesting. And Beatriz Amberman, you have been at this business of creating this dialogue for a long time, and I'm glad to see you again. Thank you for being here.
I thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation, and certainly very proud to see these two gentlemen who actually present a very accurate face of the Hispanic community that I'm glad for the public to see.
Yeah, you know, and Beatriz, you and I have talked about a lot over the years. This debate in which we have found ourselves quite a lot embroiled this summer, having to do with immigration. The Attorney General now joining with 8 other states in backing the Arizona immigration law. Our television sets have been full of this story all summer. I wonder how that translates to the relationships that you're trying to develop here in Hampton Roads.
Well, one of the things that I've seen is that the leadership, the Hispanic leadership across the state of Virginia has increasingly become more active and more voiceful. As a matter of fact, we have had several letters written to either the governor or the Attorney General, as well as Janet Napolitano, expressing our concerns and feeling that actually this type of laws take Virginia not only back, but really portray a Virginia that we don't want the public to see. For instance, Virginia Beach is a community that depends on tourism. And for me, it is important that people understand that Virginia is a welcoming and inclusive community. And to send this message, I think it will be very detrimental to our economy and to attracting tourism.
Well, it's been interesting to watch what's happened in Arizona because, as you know, there are quite a number of efforts around boycotting Arizona in protest of some of these initiatives that are underway there. And you've just come back from Arizona.
I had a conversation with several legislators in Arizona, and actually they were quite concerned over the impact that eventually this type of law is going to have on the citizens of the state. They are thinking that maybe some taxes may be increased and so forth in order for people to, you know, make up for the difference in income that the state derives from either businesses in other areas, you know. And I feel that that's probably one of the things that we have to consider in Virginia. And we're not too far away from an example that we had in our state several years ago with Prince William County. They tried to implement this type of law, and eventually they had to rescind somehow, you know, parts of the law because the police department stated that in order for them to not be sued and accused of profiling, they had to have cameras installed and so forth. This always comes with a price, and so eventually it's taxpayers that have to foot the bill.
And I think in Prince William, I think that was one of the most aggressive anti-immigration counties really in the country. So let's talk about this significant issue of immigration. Then I want to come back around to how we go about expanding opportunity, because that's really what it's about. 12 million in this country? Beatriz, what's your sense? How do we get there? What would you like to see happen in terms of that population, many of whom are living in fear? We're now getting issues with the education of their children and all. What do you want to see happen?
Well, we are asking President Barack Obama to fulfill its promise to the community and really start talking seriously about comprehensive immigration reform. And I know that we repeat that word, over and over.
Right.
But it is very broad, which means that we realistically in this nation have to look at how many workers certain companies and industries in America really need so that we can have enough people that actually fulfill those jobs. At the same time, we have to take into consideration people that have been paying taxes, working in our country, and have a home already in this nation. Many of them, have been painted as people that people should be worried about. And I say that we have to look that many of these people have been here for 20 plus years.
So pathway to citizenship, is it? Or?
No, really, that's not what we're saying. Okay. What we are saying is we understand that there are procedures, but right now there is no procedure. We want these people to certainly go back to the line, pay fines, make sure that they have paid taxes all along, and show that they have no criminal record. I feel that this would be beneficial to the nation. And so we don't need to be talking about how to solve this issue city by city and having different laws all over the country.
And Dr. Campo, I want to make sure that we note at the top that this conversation we're about to embark on is not in any respect a reflection on Regent. These are your personal comments.
Yes.
But I wonder what your take on this is.
Well, I think just picking up from one of the things that Beatriz said was we have vilified and objectified a people, and to me that's one of the places we have to begin. That sort of discussion has to stop, the way we talk about human beings in this country. And again, lumping us all together, people talk to me and the first thing they hear, if the first thing is my name, the question will be, what's your citizenship? What's your documentation?
People ask you that?
Yes, they have, absolutely.
Oh my goodness!
Yes,
that's shocking.
It is shocking, and I think people are shocked when they hear those kinds of things. But I think we all can tell similar stories, and I know our children can as well. But so there's a place to start, and to know that this Arizona law, to me, I've called it a cry for help in so many ways. When do we begin this discussion? Stop the vitriol, stop the political emphasis, and say this is about humanity. One of the things we don't hear enough of, Cathy, from my perspective, is for how many years did America not just look the other way in terms of immigrants, especially those who came from Mexico, but really encourage them to come? I mean,
how many businesses have been built on the backs of people who've been here illegally because they would work for less money?
That's right. So, let's educate. As an educator, let's get educated about what the past tells us, what are the current facts. We hear that about 30% of the folks that are here illegally from all over the world don't want to be citizens at all. They want work permits. So can we have this discussion? Can we hear those kinds of things? Can we see the broader issue and get away from the objectification and the vitriol, and let's get down to some business and make some real changes that make sense.
Do you see much hope for that? I mean, we're so consumed with the economy right now and wars and all the rest of it. Do you see much hope for that conversation?
I think beyond all of that, it's November and it's election time, and we're not going to see anything before then. Yeah. But after the election, I do have hope. I do believe that the president has made a commitment to this issue, and so I think he is going to push this issue forward and force us to at least have a conversation.
And so as you think about that term comprehensive immigration reform, and if you're in charge of the world, I'm not giving you the job, but if you're in charge of the world,
Thanks,
wave your magic wand. What would that look like from your perspective? What do you think is an approach that would recognize the humanity that you're talking about?
Well, I think before we do anything, we have to be able to tell people we can have a conversation, and you can trust that this conversation is going to be one that will be civil. Yes. And I don't have to tell you that it's not just a Latino issue, but when you talk about Latino cultures, my father was a Cuban man. Cuban folks generally don't trust the government. And so if the government tells you we're here to help, let's come out and have a conversation, that's not going to play well very often. So we need leadership within the country, Latino leadership, to step up and say, it's time to have the conversation. It's a safe place to have the conversation. And that's a very important starting point.
Yeah, it's a great point. I wonder, Mr. De La Fuente, as you think about this issue of comprehensive immigration reform, have you also been asked about your citizenship?
Yes,
Very
and insulted along the way with, why do you have this job or that other job? So, yes.
Really?
Yes, in recent history. So yes, it's
in recent
it's
history,
amazing.
Meaning since you've been the head of Farm Fresh?
I would say in the last few months.
Really?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little shocked by that.
Yeah.
Although I should never be shocked at what people will say, because we are in a culture where people do feel, for so many reasons, that they can, have no filter between what comes in the head and what comes out of the mouth. But I wonder, when you think about this issue of comprehensive immigration reform, what would that look like for you, and how do you think we get at that issue?
I would say the same thing. Any comments that I make don't necessarily represent
Forgive me, I should have made that disclaimer on your behalf as well. Yeah.
It's a very complex issue that is going to require a lot more thought and a lot more dialogue. In my case, I do have family members that have tried to go through the legal process, but for now have been sitting in the bureaucracy because we have just put a stop to all forms of immigration. So it's not just the illegal part, it's also the legal part.
Right? I mean,
the legal part has also come to a complete stop, and it's hurting families, and I also believe that it's hurting the economy. So again, complex issue. I don't have an answer, but I do believe that it needs to be through dialogue.
So both of you got where you were, I suspect, and I'm thinking corporately here, Beatriz. You get where you are because you always come to the table for the conversation. But both of you have gotten where you are in your corporation in large measure through education. And there's a grave concern. You've written a lot about this, about the education, the gap for Hispanic students. I wonder if you could give us a sense of what that gap looks like and what you think's behind it.
Well, there are a number of reasons for the achievement gap that's occurred, but one of them really gets down to language programs. And I think about my own past and my history. We talked about the fact that I'm a Cuban American, and one of the things that was a real advantage for Cuban Americans is that in the 60s, when I grew up, there was an anti-communist sentiment that aligned very well with the Cuban historical past, and so we were welcomed in a way that maybe other cultures weren't to America. And you look at the language programs that were established in Dade County, they still are the best practices that have been established anywhere in our country. So even beginning at that sort of fundamental building block level, if I could tell you, Cathy, the millions of dollars that we spend in this country to not educate someone on a language basis, and then when they get to be adults our age, we're spending millions again to give them the language. Right. So we have to reconcile that immediately and know that students in America want to be bilingual, whatever their background. It's a known entity. As a college administrator, it's something students will pay for.
Sure.
But as young people, they're very often told, well, this is an English-only environment. And those are some of the subtle changes that we can make that are non-threatening that will begin to change this conversation.
This gap is an interesting one, and you talked, Mr. De La Fuente, about this idea of seeing people who look like you in the C-suite, being able to connect with them. How did you do this from an education perspective, and what do you think about this gap that exists?
I do believe that it goes back to expectations. I think as generalizing, we might have lower expectations of ourselves than we should. In my case, again, my parents had very high expectations of me, so they were able to put me through school, studied industrial engineering, went back, did a master's degree, which were very helpful. Education opens a lot of doors, but then we still need to navigate our way through the corporate environment, and there are other factors like cultural traits that we have as Hispanics.
Such as?
We tend to be overly respectful of authority. In hierarchy. So there's a good place for that, and because we can be great team members, great soldiers, get a lot of things done, but there comes a point in which organizations are looking for leadership abilities, and that trait begins to play against you when people are looking for who's next for those leadership positions. So but again, those are things that unless you become aware of them through coaching and guidance and mentoring or better educational programs, you just don't know why you can't seem to get ahead. So it's understanding who are you, how are you being perceived, and then beginning to adjust and acclimate to the new country where you are, in the new culture. And in my case, I believe that I've been able to acclimate myself. And again, it's not about me becoming something that I am not, but it's me understanding the norms of the game, the rules of the game,
right? Yeah.
coming to the middle and building those relationships, getting people to feel more comfortable with me, and as they do, they also begin to come towards the middle in terms of building the network and building the relationships and putting whatever fears might be there of the unknown. So those are some thoughts that I would have in terms of
how has this community differed or has it, in its acceptance of you, because I was alarmed by what you said earlier, from other communities. I mean, is this community different in terms of its relationships?
I would say it's been very welcoming. I've been impressed. Obviously, we have a very strong military presence here, a lot of diversity. When I look at the numbers that I have within Farm Fresh, close to 60% of my employees are female. We have close to 42% of our employees with different demographic groups, so that's very good base that I have to begin to continue working from. So in my case, it's been a great experience because of, again, the diversity that exists already here. But it doesn't mean that we don't have opportunities within Farm Fresh, and I just need to continue building from here.
I hear you. And Carlos Campo, I want to ask the same question for you. How would you consider this community in terms of its relationship with the Hispanic community compared with other places you've been?
It's been very welcoming. I mean, I came most recently from Las Vegas, and Las Vegas has a much larger Hispanic community, no question about that. But I agree, the folks in Hampton Roads have been great. I talked to somebody early on that said the reason for that is because of the military. There's such a transiency that people sort of plug into relationship in ways that they may not in other places. I don't know if that's specifically the reason. You think that?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Yeah, I think it helps on a lot of levels. I think it really does. And we should note, just because we have some cool pictures we want to show. So you mentioned coming out of Cuba.
Yes.
And I just have to tell you, that time frame right before Castro sounds like the most marvelously exciting time to have been in Cuba.
Doesn't it, though?
It really does. I know. And your father's this band leader, right?
Yes, that's right. Campo.
Yeah, and your mother was half of the Clooney sisters. That's amazing.
That's right.
Wow, that's amazing.
Grew up in a great environment.
Indeed so. And so you're cousins with George Clooney, apparently?
Yes,
don't
please
see
don't
him
hold
much.
it against me.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't call every day.
Does he? No, he texted, I think.
That's right. But I do, everything I've ever read about that period and everything I've ever seen about that period,
glamorous.
It just sounds like it was a marvelous place to be.
My dad talks about it a lot.
I know, yeah. And of course, so many changes in the meantime. How do you see the U.S. relationship with Cuba evolving over time?
Slowly. Very slowly, and I think when you talk about change and humanitarian change and things that have to occur before we really can engage the culture, but I'm hopeful that we're chipping away at it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for all the writing that you've done on this Hispanic education gap. It's really important to not just to say minority education gap, to really look at those specifically because of exactly what all three of you have said about this issue of the cultural differences that really make a difference. Beatriz Amberman, I've got less than a minute, but you have a big event coming up tomorrow on the 4th of September.
That is quite true. And we are going to invite all your public, Cathy, to this viewing of a film. It's called Liberty Street, and it's going to be on Saturday, September the 4th, at the Virginia Beach Central Library. This is a conversation on immigration, and we wish that everybody with different points of view could come and have this civic conversation so that we can encourage everyone to participate actively and make sure that we build a good community for everyone to live in. And just to encourage also the members of my community to participate actively when the General Assembly comes into session, and let your legislators know what is acceptable and what is good for our community as a standard to live in.
Civically and civilly.
Yes,
Beatriz
yes,
Amberman, thank you so much for being. Thanks to both of you for being. Welcome. I hope it's a fabulous time for you. Be back in just a moment with a final thought. Be wherever you are on the question of immigration, but Forbes this month had a column worth noting. While Hispanics comprise nearly 16% of the total U.S. population, their numbers in the executive suite are positively microscopic, less than 1%. The author is a professor at Southern Methodist University, and he suggests that our challenges are too daunting to ignore the leadership of a group to whose prosperity the nation is clearly tied. It seems Hispanic managers tend to reach middle management faster than others, but they stay there longer. And you just heard Mr. De La Fuente talk about this. Recent research suggesting that there may be reasons for that. Being that good soldier and team player, writes SMU professor Miguel Quiñones, works great to get to middle management, but it is not the kind of leadership that is necessarily going to get you into the C-suite. So that's one of those cultural issues that we run into. And consider as well the corporate realities of who you know. If Hispanics only represent 1% of corporate executives, the odds of a middle manager being able to leverage social capital is far less. At SMU, they're working with rising Hispanic stars on self-awareness and building networks to increase social capital. And as I look around, I am persuaded by Professor Quiñones' argument that we are up against too much not to bring all of our best and brightest minds to the table. You can watch any of our programs online at whatmatters.tv, and while you're there, go ahead and tell us what you think. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter so we can let you know what we're working on here at WHRO. And for more local talk, I hope you'll join us weekdays noon to 1 on 89.5 WHRV for a little program we call Hearsay. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another look at what matters.